Hey guys, first regardsman here, and today I brought on Jeficus with me once again to discuss whether or not Space Marine 2's updates are coming out too slow of a pace. So what is up, Jeff? How do you feel about the current state of content drops for this game?
So right now I feel really good about it, but there are a lot of issues that are starting to really rear their heads. For example, when I look at the content updates for this game, specifically referencing things like patch 11 and beyond, it doesn't seem like we're getting enough for how long we have to wait for the content updates. And then there's always, of course, the never ending discussion of the current prestige leveling system, which is basically just driving players away. Anytime people try to come back to the game, they grind a little bit of XP, and then they get demoralized whenever they have to reset the level of their Space Marines.
Definitely. I think that with the PTS that recently came out for patch 11.0, if you're not a PC player and you're on the consoles, basically, you don't have the option to try out any of this new content. You haven't had anything really new for this game since September at that point. That is pretty intense. We look at the roadmap that's coming up for the Tech Marine release. I don't think we're going to see anything for this game in December, and then January won't have anything until like the very end for like probably a PTS for the Tech Marine. And the content drought is going to be pretty intense. This has happened previously in the year one pass, where basically January was just like a dead game. This isn't exactly like abnormal for game launches, because usually companies know they'll all go on vacation after December and things like that. But as far as like these massive content droughts are concerned, on top of this enormous grind that's only going to get worse in the future, I feel like Space Marine 2 tends to release its updates like 2 to 3 weeks too late, if not like a month too late. Because they do say that this game is not like a live service and stuff like that, but I don't think that is entirely true. So what's your opinion on that one?
Well, it's certainly being funded like a live service. It doesn't have a crazy microtransaction system like a true live service game like Genshin Impact or anything like that. But when it comes to a game like Destiny 2, that was funded by, or even just the original Destiny more specifically, that was funded by annual expansions. And we're kind of at the point right now where you can look at the Space Marine 2 annual passes as just annual expansions. You're just giving the company money so that they can continue to make
Yeah, pretty
content
much.
all year. Yeah, it really is what it is. So it for sure is a live service. It's really hard to say that it's not, especially if you're benefiting from everything for free, because you're not actually, like, if you don't care about any of the cosmetics, then you're just getting
Yeah, you are getting all the
updates
gameplay
fed into
basically,
you.
which
Yeah,
is which
which
is a good
is
thing.
that's awesome. That's really cool. That's amazing. But there are going to be consequences for that at the studio level, because they're not going to be able to make as much content as they typically would. I actually asked my stream this once, FTG, basically asked him if you could, like, if you had to buy each operation plus the cosmetic packs together piecemeal, would you be okay with that? And every single one of them said no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't want to buy content for this game,
Yeah, I don't really
which
blame
is
them, to be honest, because Space Marine 2's player base is split between like 40k fans and like straight up horde shooter fans. I would say at this point it definitely leans more towards 40k fans, which is why the cosmetic DLC packs
oh
do
yeah.
so well. But as far as like, the grind goes for unlocking some of the stuff, because let's see, basically you have to buy the cosmetic DLC, and after you buy the cosmetic DLC, you have to grind for the cosmetic DLC. And for like, a really dedicated player, it's not a very long grind at all. But that on top of your weapon grind, players just feel like they're waiting forever to get the content they actually want to play. I actually had somebody come into my stream chat at one point and they said, "Hey man, I haven't played this game in months because I came back to the game. I was trying to get my guys prestiged up. I got 2 to like prestige 4. I just quit because I didn't want to play anymore. There's no new content in the game right now. The accolades cap for like these new heroic weapons is locked at 1,000, and I'll get into why I think it is locked at 1,000. But the point is, as a new player or even just like a returning player, you are just like hit by this absolute wall of grind with a very slow content drop. And hard stratagems, they did keep players around. Like the player numbers are definitely up from what they were in like year one. But as far as like this cap goes, and as far as like the overall enjoyment of stratagems, I feel like most people still prefer the operations. I made a community poll for that as well. It just seems like the majority of the community, like they know what they like to play. They like to play the basic operations. Siege mode is pretty dead. The hard stratagems are usually done just to unlock the heroic weapons and people move on. Hopefully patch 11 will fix that. But like, how do you feel about the overall player retention retention for like the current content we have in the game.
Oh, I feel like it's really the current content is not really doing enough. I think right now a lot of people are being retained specifically by the grind to give the grind a little bit of credit here, but at the same time, it's causing severe burnout for another massive part of the player base, and it's causing burnout for the people who are being retained for the grind because as soon as they hit Prestige 6, they run out of things to grind. They no longer want to play the game anymore. And Saber is doing a couple of things that are addressing replayability. For example, the stratagems that switch up the variants of enemies on operations. I think that's a really good idea, but I also think that that should just be part of the base game. That should just be part of base operations because you take your operations pool of around 10, 11, 12 operations and you effectively just multiply it by 2 or 3 by making it so that different enemies can spawn on different levels. I was talking to, I believe, Behind the Grind channel plug about this, and he has the same opinion as me. Like, just to make the current content that we have way more replayable by switching up enemy variety and variants, throwing different factions in there, and throwing in a couple of different surprises as well. It may not make sense from like a narrative perspective because you have all the characters narrating like, oh, like, you know, that we're on the Inferno mission and it's supposed to be Tyranids, but you're fighting Chaos. But realistically, like, it doesn't matter at this point. Like, players just want to experience the game differently. Maybe in like the lower difficulties, the narrative is like the same. The same. It's streamlined. But then as soon as you get to absolute, it's like, okay, yeah, you could get Chaos now. You just you straight up like, here you go.
Yeah, it'd be cool to just have like those straight up just dynamic interactions. I think that's something that's really missing from this game, are like a true dynamic director. I know like you can have different spawns in the maps and stuff like that, but the maps feel like 90% the same, and occasionally the game will just send like everything at you.
You see the patterns when you've done enough solo absolutes. You see the patterns.
Oh, definitely.
Like it's really easy to read what's about to happen.
Yeah, when the game's gonna end, like usually in siege mode and things like this, the game ends at like a relatively the same point because there just isn't enough variance. It's actually pretty easy to plan out what's gonna happen in your game at a certain point because usually only so much can happen because the director is just not dynamic enough yet. There's not enough in the game or enough systems in the game to like truly allow it to just be like crazy. And let's say, like, you know, if we look at the modifiers in Darktide has a ton of interesting modifiers. Things like the, let's say, ventilation purge, where there are a ton of fog, there's a ton of fog on the map. You have a ton of snipers. They'll just pop out. 8 snipers at once is just so different from anything else you're going to find in the normal Orc Maelstroms and Orc gameplay. And as far as Space Marine 2 is concerned, when you're playing a solo absolute, I mean, that can be pretty damn hard, but like you usually start to notice the patterns like you said before. And on top of that, even the hard stratagems, most of the stratagems, even some of the new ones, they just feel like gimmicks. They don't really feel like they change up the way I'm playing that much. It's just like, okay, I'm going to be using this build now versus the one I was using before. And that's the thing that just doesn't feel super good. It feels less like I am really struggling to beat the stratagem due to like player thought, and more so that I'm struggling to beat the stratagem because it's like, okay, your numbers suck now. And you are now stuck fighting with like 30% HP, which means you get one shot, which means that your build is just streamlined to one choice, basically, which kind of sucks. And I just feel like this game severely needs a proper, like, maybe even a roguelike mode or something like that to really give players an idea of like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to start off with this weapon, and then the map will give me new options to pick up. Because you play campaign, you know, you basically are able to swap out your weapons progressively as you go like different checkpoints and stuff. That'd be pretty cool in the actual game. There's kind of a loadout system for that. But as far as like randomization is concerned, it's just not there, which is pretty lame.
That would be really cool, and I think that that's a really good idea for Saber or someone to put into their back pocket for later, because I do think that the Tech Marine will basically inject a fresh take of the game's experience for a lot of people.
Definitely.
But at the same time, once the updates get a little too formulaic, like let's say we get to year 3, year 4 of Space Marine 2, and we're just kind of continuing to print new heroic weapons, new stratagems, and new operations every single update, then you are going to start to see a significant drop off in players because the prestige grind hasn't been addressed yet, because the accolade grind hasn't been addressed yet, and it becomes a bit too intense for people, etc., etc., etc. And the updates, again, they just become formulaic. People kind of already know what to expect. And so you will have people who, for better or for worse, will possibly put the game down for an entire year straight because they would just rather wait for 3 or 4 operations to have been released, come back to the game, experience all of them, play, and then leave again and wait for another year of content updates to release. Unless
does
there's like
definitely
a
feel
banging
like
new game mode or something, right?
oh yeah, a banger new game mode was supposed to be Siege mode. Siege mode definitely worked, but my issue with a lot of the updates in Space Marine 2 is that they launched in such a buggy state, and bugs in Space Marine 2 last forever. A lot of the bugs in the game currently are there
Oh, yeah.
from launch. They do not fix them in a reasonable time at all. Hot fixes barely happen in this game, and it's kind of ridiculous to just sit there and wait for like one perk to be changed over the course of like a month plus, which is positively ridiculous. The assault's
Dude,
overcharge perk has
the
been bugged.
the first perk on the assault got reworked in patch 10, and I wanted to experiment with it because I wanted to see how it functions, and if you're using it with block weapons, if that 100% damage increase or whatever would basically one shot like different Majoris enemies depending on the weapon you're using. And I brought it into a mission, and it just doesn't work. We're a couple of weeks away from patch 11 launching, and the patch or the perk just does not work. It doesn't function. Like it's literally just like off, like it's turned off. It doesn't do anything.
That is definitely a great point, on top of the fact
That's
that not
nuts.
just the first perk, but the second perk right now, Overcharge, is also bugged, where
That's
it's
nuts.
still not working on anything but the Thunderhammer, and patch 11 will fix it. But what games company is making people wait a month to fix one single bug on a perk? There aren't that many perks in this game. Can you imagine if Darktide did that?
No.
Where every single time there was one perk bug that went on vacation. They did do that a single time with the Mallocator perk on the Arbites class, but that was a bit of a just unfortunate event of timing with vacation for Sweden and stuff like that. With Saber Interactive,
Right,
it's
yeah.
every single patch, every single time you have this issue where some game-breaking bug is in the game, and they just don't patch it for like an entire patch. And it's ridiculous to me that we have to wait over a month to get one perk fixed or a bugged interaction with a weapon. If something is egregiously bad, we do see them work overtime or like, get out a patch really quickly. And that did happen during the original lethal difficulty launch, where the lethal difficulty was so bad, it was going to hurt their player retention so horribly that they pumped out a bunch of buffs and a hotfix immediately after, like within a week. And we have never seen them work that fast ever again for an update that substantial.
Exactly,
And the reason
yeah.
for that is that the outcry was just too much for them. And they're like, okay, oh shit, this is like 2 months after the launch of our game. We have to actually fix this, or people are just going to leave. Because at some point, Saber wants player retention. Obviously, they say this is not a live service game, but it's teetering on a live service game. It has an entire roadmap. It's kind of ridiculous to say it's not. But as far as the future updates go, if they keep having these massive bugs, people are just going to leave. I mean, there are bugs in the game right now where you have a parry bug, where your parry will just phase through an enemy, and half the new players in the game, they encounter this bug, and they think they just suck ass at parrying, but it's not them. That the enemy's attack actually phased through their parry, locked them into an entire animation, and killed them. And that's a terrible feeling for a lot of people, and they have not fixed those. And the more you leave things like this in the game, the more players will quit. That on top of the grind is enough for a lot of people to quit anyways. And by the time Space Marine 3 starts to move into full development, they might just abandon Space Marine 2. Like, that might just be the case that this game will be in, where they'll give it super drip-fed updates until the launch of Space Marine 3. And that's the worry of a lot of players, that after year 2, they might just move the development to Space Marine 3, or like at year 4 at the latest. I'm curious what you think about that part.
I think that there's probably a funding target, because I think that Space Marine 2 is basically funded all the way throughout 3-4 years of development, and a lot of the DLC is likely, or specifically the money being made from the DLC, is likely going towards funding Space Marine 3. It's very likely. And what we've seen with I think what we've seen with Games Workshop basically making Titus like a canonical main character, captain of the second company, all of these really freaking cool things. I
Except for the
think we can
miniature.
kind of see where Space Marine 3 is heading and how big it's likely going to be.
It's gonna be their biggest
And
game.
so,
Be their biggest game
dude, it's
by far.
it's gonna be the biggest Warhammer 40k game released ever, probably.
Probably, yeah.
And it's they're already starting the marketing campaign for it,
Yeah,
which
Titus
is
being a
exciting, of
captain
course.
is huge. Ultra, he's the he's the poster boy for the poster boy chapter of Ultramarines
Yeah,
at this point, and he's getting his own secret level episodes. Might even be in the TV show of Henry Cavill. Who the fuck knows at this point? But the point is
dude,
that you're
who
gonna
knows?
have Ultramarines everywhere. Titus will be everywhere. Space Marine is gonna be the big thing for 40k in gaming. And if they keep having this slow content drop for Space Marine 2, it really just does feel like we're being held over. That's what it feels like.
The
I imagine the content
well,
drops will be better.
returning to the main point, dude. You once said that you don't believe that the current audience of Space Marine 2 is the audience that Saber is really trying to capture, and I think you're right. I think Games Workshop and Saber, they've got their eyes on the big leagues. They are prepping to launch a crazy, massive, content-driven game in Space Marine 3 with a much more broad appeal. And it's probably very likely that Saber is doing kind of a opportunity cost analysis on Space Marine 2. Like, hey, do we need 40 or 60 or however many developers are developing the content for Space Marine 2 updates? Do we really need these guys sticking around here for what is like, 30 to 50k concurrent players? Do we really need that, or can we just move these assets over to Space Marine 3 development because it's going to be that big, it's going to be that good?
I think that is true. I still hold that opinion that I do think Space Marine 3 is the game they're really after. I think that's why they announced it so early, because they realized immediately Space Marine 2 is way bigger than they ever expected it to be. They expected Space Marine 2 to be like every other 40k game where they could just make their game and then it'll have a bit of a player base after, like practically every single 40k game it does to some degree, because it's just a huge property. But in the case of Space Marine, it exploded. It was a huge game. It hit the mainstream. It hit the mainstream more than 40k has in like a decade, to the point that
Yeah.
Games Workshop saw, they immediately looked over and were like, okay, Henry Cavill show coming out. Space Marine 3 needs to be put into development. Space Marine 2 needs to be held over. Here's more funding. Put all of your attention on Space Marine 2 and Space Marine 3. Hold Space Marine 2 players over, because they'll be dedicated, and then put all these assets into Space Marine 3. Because I see a lot of people ask me all the time, what will Space Marine 3 have for enemies? I'm like 99% the same as Space Marine 2, because they're going to asset flip everything and then add on top of that. Imagine Space Marine 2 just be the tutorial for Space Marine 3. That's what I think it actually is. I think the game is going to be an asset flipped game. I think that Space Marine 2 is just the testing ground for a lot of things they're going to implement into Space Marine 3. I don't know if Saber Interactive is the company that is talented enough in actual build design to maintain a live service on the level of what Space Marine 3 might actually turn out to be.
So
We'll
I actually
see,
have something to say about that, because Warhammer Survivors just got announced, and it's being developed not only by Auroch, the guys who made Bolt Gun, but also by Pinnacle, the guys who made Vampire Survivors. This is a joint endeavor, and this is a very Warhammer or Games Workshop directed game. And so I would not be surprised if what we're going to start to see with Warhammer video games in general is Games Workshop doing a lot more directing. So they'll go to Saber and be like, hey, which studio do you want helping you make this? Which studio do you want helping you make Space Marine 3? Or if Saber asks like, hey, we want like a certain voice actor for this particular character, then Games Workshop would be like, hey, let us make a phone call. Like, let us get him in. You want a celebrity? Like, let us get him in. I could see that happening just to drive development and the most positive outcome possible for Space Marine 3.
I hope that is
For
the
sure.
case, that there is a joint effort, because I'll be real. Personally, I don't think Saber Interactive has shown the interest in like properly designing the builds in their game and the weapons in their game to a level that I think will be required for a hotly popular game, to the point that Space Marine 3 will probably want to be. It will probably be carried by cosmetics in a lot of cases, just because that's how 40k is in general. But as far as games like Helldivers 2 that are huge, I feel like Helldivers 2 is a level that they are looking to reach in Space Marine 3 if they can. And we look at Helldivers 2, there is a lot of effort still put into the builds in that game versus Space Marine 2 especially, though I'll say Space Marine 2 might actually be better balanced than Helldivers 2 right now. And that being said,
Right, yeah.
Helldivers does put a lot of effort into like adding new things, trying new things. You definitely give them that. And a lot of the updates we've had in Space Marine 2, it's not that they're terrible, they're just pretty basic. Like a lot of the perk choices and the perk design is just super basic, needlessly basic, I would say. And that does worry me for Space Marine 3 if it's just Saber Interactive developing, because Saber just hasn't shown an interest in like really trying things outside the box yet. And a lot of the copied stratagems here are from World War Z and stuff like that. So hopefully that's not the case in Space Marine 3. And as far as the original topic goes for what is causing players to quit Space Marine 2, I really think it is just that grind and that long holdover between drops for of content drops, because otherwise players would be playing all the time. If you had like a monthly content drop for this game, people would not quit. They would stay there forever, and it's a really hard thing to do for any game. But it seems that kind of development will only occur in Space Marine 3, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then I think we also haven't really covered that if you really look at what's coming in year 2, and specifically the value of what we're getting in these cosmetic packs, we've already seen the leaks for what's coming ahead for the Iron Hands chapter pack, and it's only 4 successor chapters, right?
Yeah, it's only 4
Like,
successor chapters. I will be covering those at some point here, but it is only 4, just like the salamanders were, and unfortunately, that means that you're getting what is the half of some of the prior ones. I mean, the Imperial Fist
yeah,
one had 7, but still, we're getting progressively less and less from these cosmetic DLCs, and they're still priced at around $8 to $10. Now, Warhammer 40k fans are not new to being swindled and like nickel and dimed, unfortunately, and for a lot of tabletop
mhm.
players, a $10 deal, like a $10 DLC pack, is the cheapest thing they bought all year. That being said, it is extortionary. That's a ridiculous price, especially with the recent armor drops we've gotten, where they're not any better than the cosmetic packs before the champion packs are. But the chapter packs, they're pretty shit. I'm gonna be honest. This salamander one, I do not think is very good for the price. There's no chest piece
No,
or anything like that.
it's not. It really needs a chess piece. That's
Yeah, desperately.
outrageous. But I think it's sad to say, but it could be an indicator for year 3, unless assets are being diverted to year 3. But we might see significantly less value from year 3. But the price is certainly not going to go down. You're still going to have to pay $40 or so, maybe even more depending on inflation and all that. You're still going to have to pay the same price for what is effectively half of the cosmetics compared to year 2 and of course year 1, which
I
is
think it is a good indicator to,
ugh.
unfortunately, of what year 3 might be. We might wind up having a moment where there's basically no content in Space Marine 3 between like 3-month periods in year 3, depending on how year two's ending portion goes. Tech Marine launch, I think, will be the biggest launch for this game, all things said on this, because the new classes are generally the most popular thing a video game can have post-launch for a horde shooter,
Oh yeah,
especially.
yeah.
But without regular new content drops like new classes, I think we are going to be kind of cooked in year 3, unfortunately. Like this upcoming patch 11, I don't think it's going to hit that big beyond some balance changes. The new heroics are pretty cool. Heroics were a great way they could add in many new weapons, or like, little gimmicky weapons in some cases, without completely diverting a ton of resources to them. So it is good for holding players over. It does introduce a lot of new builds, but my bigger issue here is that we do see a progressive momentum that is kind of just slowing down in the year passes, because the end of year 2 doesn't look that good in my opinion. We got a lot of new operations and stuff like that, and probably some heroics along the way. But post Tech Marine, I think Tech Marine will just be the best update in the next year. It'll probably be pretty buggy, but new class, it's a new class, be a pretty huge way to change up all the class dynamics in the game. But Siege mode right now is a dead mode. They're gonna add a new map to Siege mode. I don't know how much players are actually gonna care about that, because Siege mode hasn't been popular since like August, unfortunately. And hopefully
Right.
we'll see them change this kind of update schedule in the future. But for now, I'm kind of holding my breath, because I think they just haven't really addressed fundamental issues in the game already, like bugs and the horrible grind. And until that is fixed, I think players will continue to trickle out a little bit. So that's pretty much all I have to say on this one. You have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Just in a more positive light, I think that there are very small changes that Saber can make to the game that would basically increase player retention significantly. One, just a minor overhaul of the prestige leveling system, just make it so that it's more of a true level
That's a huge
system.
one.
Whenever players get their next prestige rank, they get their prestige perk, and their perks don't refresh, they don't reset. Nobody is going to be mad if this changes. It's just going to mean a more bountiful and bigger player base because people are going to actually be motivated to do the grind. Two, remove the accolade cap, make it so that accolade farming is much easier. The One of the big issues that I'm starting to see again is just the pileup of rewards. We're going to see it with patch 11. We're going to see it with patch 12, patch 13, where we're going to have so many heroic weapons and so many heroic armor pieces, the cosmetics specifically, that players are going to kind of be overloaded and they're going to want to grind everything, but they're not able to. They're not able to really grind on a daily basis in a healthy way. So there's that, and then of course take a look at the game modes that we already have and do a little bit of a shakeup. You know, make it so that for operations we can just see in absolute difficulty. We can see chaos in Tyranid missions, and we can see Tyranids in chaos missions, or a mix of both. I think players generally like fighting both, basically, like for like Vox Liberatus and the highly anticipated.
I think people they
patch
mind
12
chaos
map.
a lot less when they get to fight with Tyranids. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, bug fixes.
Bug fixes.
Bug
are big.
fixes, bug fixes, bug fixes.
That's a great point, Jeff. And thank you for joining me once again. If you guys have not seen Jeficus, he has his own YouTube channel and his own Twitch stream and YouTube stream. Check him out over there. If you like my content, subscribe for more. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Take it easy. Bye.
The Emperor protects.